He slides into the coffee shop like he owns the place. Designer jacket, perfect stubble, that knowing smile that makes women turn their heads before they remember they shouldn't. Within 10 minutes, he's charmed the barista, gotten 2 phone numbers, and left 3 women wondering what just happened to their carefully constructed emotional boundaries. You watch this performance with a mixture of admiration and confusion. How does he make it look so effortless? How does he read women like they're open books while you're still struggling with the first page? How does he navigate romantic complexity with the precision of a surgeon while you're still trying to figure out if she likes you or just being polite? Here's the truth that nobody talks about. That man sitting across the coffee shop, the one who seems to have unlocked the mysteries of female psychology, didn't start this way. In fact, he probably started as the exact opposite. The guy who believed too much, loved too hard, and trusted too completely. What you're witnessing isn't natural talent, it's scar tissue that learned to dance. Today, I'm going to reveal why the men who appear most confident with women are often the ones who've been hurt the most, and how psychological trauma can paradoxically create romantic mastery. Walk into any social setting, and you'll spot him immediately. The man who makes conversation with women look like breathing. He says the right thing at the right moment, reads emotional temperatures with supernatural accuracy, and navigates romantic interactions with the fluidity of a master dancer. Everything about his approach screams natural ability, inborn charisma, genetic gift for understanding the female mind. This is the greatest illusion in modern dating culture. What appears to be effortless natural ability is actually the result of intensive, often painful education in human psychology. The smoothness you're witnessing isn't the absence of effort. It's effort that has been refined through repetition until it becomes unconscious competence. Think about a concert pianist performing a complex piece. Their fingers move across the keys with seemingly magical fluidity, creating beautiful music that appears to flow directly from their soul to the instrument. But behind that effortless performance are thousands of hours of practice, countless mistakes, frustrating plateaus, and moments of wanting to give up entirely. The music sounds natural because the effort has been internalized. The same principle applies to men who excel with women. That conversational smoothness represents thousands of interactions where he learned what works and what doesn't. That emotional intelligence comes from analysing countless situations where he misread signals and paid the price. That confident approach is built on a foundation of rejections, misunderstandings, and social failures that taught him exactly how to avoid making the same mistakes twice. The effortless illusion is maintained because skilled practitioners never discuss the learning curve. They don't talk about the awkward phase, the rejection collection process, or the systematic study of female psychology that created their current abilities. They present the finished product without revealing the messy development process that made it possible. But here's what's truly fascinating. Most of these men didn't choose to develop these skills. They were forced into mastery by circumstances that made the alternative, remaining romantically incompetent, too painful to tolerate. Every man who excels with women carries what I call the romantic refugee story, a personal history of believing too deeply in idealized love, only to have that belief system shattered by brutal reality. These men didn't start as players or manipulators. They started as romantics, idealists, true believers in the fairy tale version of love that culture taught them to expect. The romantic refugee typically begins his journey as what society calls a good guy. He believes in soulmates, thinks love conquers all, and approaches relationships with the kind of earnest devotion that movies celebrate but real life often punishes. He brings flowers on first dates, writes heartfelt letters, remembers important anniversaries, and treats women with the kind of respect and adoration that should theoretically make him irresistible. But instead of being rewarded for his romantic sincerity, he discovers a harsh truth. The women he worships often prefer men who treat them with calculated indifference. The girls he puts on pedestals frequently choose guys who barely seem to notice them. The relationships he invests his entire heart into often end with him being replaced by someone who appeared to care far less. This creates what psychologists call cognitive dissonance, the mental distress that occurs when your beliefs conflict with observable reality. The romantic refugee faces a devastating choice: continue believing in romantic ideals that consistently fail him, or abandon those beliefs and learn what actually works in the real world of human attraction. The transformation usually happens after what I call the final betrayal, the relationship that hurts so profoundly that it forces a complete re-evaluation of everything he thought he knew about women and love. This might be the girlfriend who leaves him for his best friend, the fiancé who cheats with someone who treats her poorly, or the woman who tells him he's too nice, while dating men who are demonstrably less kind, less loyal, and less invested in her well-being. The final betrayal serves as a psychological catalyst that transforms romantic idealism into strategic realism. The refugee realizes that his previous approach wasn't just ineffective, it was actively counterproductive. His sincerity was being interpreted as weakness, his devotion as desperation, his romantic gestures as evidence that he had no other options. After the final betrayal, something fundamental shifts in the romantic refugee's approach to dating. He stops operating from emotion and starts operating from curiosity. His heart becomes a laboratory where he conducts controlled experiments in human attraction, testing hypotheses about what actually creates desire versus what he was taught should create desire. This laboratory phase is where true expertise begins to develop. Instead of approaching women with the goal of expressing his feelings or demonstrating his worthiness, he approaches them with the goal of understanding their psychology. He becomes a behavioral scientist studying mating dynamics, an anthropologist examining modern courtship rituals, a detective investigating the gap between what women say they want and what they actually respond to. The laboratory mindset creates emotional detachment that, paradoxically, makes him more attractive. When he's studying female behavior rather than trying to impress women, he appears more confident because he's not emotionally invested in any particular outcome. When he's testing conversation strategies rather than hoping for validation, he seems more interesting because he's not desperately seeking approval. This detachment also allows him to see patterns that his previous emotional investment had obscured. He notices that women respond more positively when he's slightly less available than when he's completely available. He observes that playful teasing creates more attraction than earnest compliments. He discovers that maintaining some mystery generates more interest than revealing everything about himself immediately. The laboratory phase teaches him that attraction operates according to psychological principles rather than moral principles. Kindness doesn't automatically create desire. Devotion doesn't guarantee loyalty. Good intentions don't ensure good outcomes. These realizations are painful because they shatter romantic illusions, but they're also liberating because they provide a roadmap for actually achieving the romantic success that eluded him when he was following conventional wisdom. During this experimental period, he develops what I call strategic empathy, the ability to understand women's emotional patterns, not from a place of worship or resentment, but from a place of scientific curiosity. He learns to read subtle social cues, decode mixed signals, and predict behavioral responses with increasing accuracy. The most crucial insight about men who excel with women is understanding how psychological scar tissue functions in romantic contexts. When the romantic refugee's belief system gets shattered, it doesn't just disappear, it gets replaced by a more durable, realistic framework that's designed to prevent future emotional devastation. Scar tissue in the body is stronger than the original skin it replaces. It's less flexible, less sensitive, but more resistant to damage. The same principle applies to psychological scar tissue. The romantic refugee's new belief system about women and relationships is less idealistic than his original romantic worldview, but it's also less vulnerable to the kind of betrayals that destroyed his previous relationships. This scar tissue manifests as emotional boundaries that feel like confidence to outside observers. The romantic refugee no longer invests his entire self-worth in any single woman's opinion of him, because he's learned that female attraction is changeable, often irrational, and rarely based on the qualities he was told women value most. This emotional self-protection reads as attractive indifference to women who are accustomed to men seeking their validation. The transformation creates what I call defensive mastery, skill that develops not from natural talent or positive reinforcement, but from the necessity of avoiding future psychological damage. The romantic refugee becomes expert at reading women because misreading signals was what led to his previous heartbreak. He develops conversational skills because knowing what to say prevents the awkward interactions that once made him feel inadequate. This defensive expertise often surpasses natural ability because it's forged under pressure. A man who learns to swim because he fell off a boat will often become a stronger swimmer than someone who learned in a comfortable pool with supportive instructors. The urgency of avoiding emotional drowning creates focus and motivation that recreational learning rarely achieves. The scar tissue also creates what appears to be mysterious depth. The romantic refugee has experienced genuine emotional pain, which gives him access to psychological territories that men who've never been deeply hurt can't navigate. Women sense this emotional complexity, even when they can't articulate what they're perceiving. He seems more interesting than other men because he carries the weight of real experience. One of the most powerful advantages that wounded men possess in romantic contexts is what I call the emotional archaeology effect, their ability to excavate and understand layers of female psychology that less experienced men can't even detect. When you've been hurt by women, you develop hypersensitive radar for emotional inconsistencies, hidden motivations, and unconscious patterns. The romantic refugee has learned to dig beneath surface communications to understand what women actually mean versus what they actually say. This skill develops from necessity. Men who can't decode female psychology accurately keep getting hurt by the same patterns. The emotional archaeology begins during the laboratory phase, when the romantic refugee starts analysing past relationships to understand what went wrong. He examines conversations where he misread signals, situations where he misinterpreted interest, and moments where he failed to recognise warning signs of relationship problems. This forensic examination of his romantic history teaches him to see patterns that were invisible when he was emotionally invested. Over time, this analytical approach becomes automatic. He can sense when a woman is testing him, when she's seeking validation, when she's genuinely interested versus when she's just being polite. He recognises the difference between what women think they want and what they actually respond to. He understands the gap between conscious desires and unconscious attraction triggers. This archaeological ability makes him incredibly attractive because women rarely encounter men who truly understand their psychology. Most men interact with women based on assumption, projection, or wishful thinking. The emotional archaeologist interacts based on actual understanding of female motivational patterns, emotional rhythms, and behavioural tendencies. Women find this understanding intoxicating because it makes them feel truly seen in a way that few men can achieve. The emotional archaeologist doesn't just respond to what women say, he responds to what they mean, what they need, and what they're unconsciously communicating through body language, tone, and behavioural patterns. Perhaps the most counterintuitive skill that emerges from romantic trauma is what I call the strategic indifference algorithm, the ability to care just enough to be engaging while caring too little to be needy. This delicate calibration is nearly impossible to achieve without having experienced the pain of caring too much. The romantic refugee learns that excessive investment in any particular woman's response creates desperation that women can smell from across the room. He discovers that emotional neediness is attraction poison, regardless of how justified that neediness might seem from a logical perspective. This knowledge forces him to develop internal mechanisms for maintaining emotional equilibrium, even when interacting with women he finds highly attractive. Strategic indifference isn't about not caring at all. It's about caring in a way that doesn't compromise your attractiveness or emotional stability. The skilled practitioner can be interested in a woman without being desperate for her approval. He can enjoy her company without needing her validation. He can pursue her without chasing her. This algorithm develops through repeated exposure to situations where excessive emotional investment led to romantic failure. The romantic refugee learns to recognize the internal signals that indicate he's becoming too attached too quickly. He develops strategies for maintaining emotional distance even when physical and psychological attraction are pulling him toward overinvestment. The algorithm also teaches him to distinguish between women who are genuinely interested and women who are simply enjoying the attention he provides. Men who haven't been hurt repeatedly often can't make this distinction, which leads them to waste enormous amounts of time and emotional energy on women who are never serious candidates for actual relationships. Strategic indifference creates a paradox that drives female attraction. The less a man needs a woman's approval, the more likely he is to receive it. This principle operates because neediness signals low value in the mating marketplace, while selective interest signals high value. The romantic refugee has learned this lesson through painful experience, which makes his indifference authentic rather than performed. One of the most fascinating aspects of romantic trauma transformation is how it creates men who are simultaneously more vulnerable and more protected than they were before their emotional education. This paradox explains why wounded men often become irresistibly attractive to women who crave emotional depth. The romantic refugee has experienced genuine psychological pain, which gives him access to emotional territories that protected men never explore. He understands heartbreak from the inside, knows what betrayal feels like, and has navigated the territory of lost love. This experience creates emotional depth that women find magnetically attractive, because most men operate from much shallower psychological landscapes. At the same time, his wounds have taught him to protect himself from future damage. He's developed emotional boundaries, learned to recognize red flags, and created internal systems for avoiding the mistakes that led to his previous pain. This protection makes him appear strong and self-sufficient, qualities that generate attraction in women who are tired of men who need them for emotional stability. The vulnerability paradox creates what I call accessible depth, the ability to connect emotionally with women while maintaining psychological independence. The romantic refugee can engage in meaningful conversations about love, loss, and relationships because he's lived through these experiences, but he can do so without becoming emotionally dependent on the woman he's sharing with because his self-worth no longer depends on external validation. This combination proves irresistible to many women because it offers them access to genuine emotional connection without the burden of having to provide constant reassurance or validation. They get to explore psychological depth with a man who won't crumble if they need space, disagree with him, or fail to respond to his communications immediately. The paradox also explains why some women become addicted to emotionally unavailable men. They sense the depth beneath the protection and want access to it, but the very protection that makes the man attractive also prevents the kind of complete emotional merger that would ultimately destroy the attraction. After enough exposure to relationship dynamics, the romantic refugee develops what I call the pattern recognition matrix, an internal system for rapidly identifying female behavioral patterns, motivational structures, and relationship trajectories. This matrix operates automatically, allowing him to predict outcomes and adjust strategies with remarkable accuracy. The matrix develops through pattern exposure rather than theoretical learning. The romantic refugee has experienced enough interactions with different types of women to recognize recurring themes, predictable cycles, and universal tendencies. He can spot a woman who's rebounding from a relationship, identify someone who's seeking validation rather than connection, and recognize when interest is genuine versus when it's simply social politeness. This pattern recognition makes him incredibly efficient in romantic interactions, because he doesn't waste time on situations that aren't going to develop into anything meaningful. He can quickly assess whether a woman is genuinely available for a relationship or just entertaining options. He can tell the difference between someone who's playing games and someone who's authentically interested. The matrix also allows him to calibrate his approach based on what type of woman he's interacting with. He understands that different personality types respond to different communication styles, that various emotional states require different approaches, and that timing matters as much as technique in romantic interactions. Women find this adaptability attractive because it makes them feel understood, rather than subjected to a generic pickup routine. The romantic refugee can adjust his personality, conversation style, and emotional temperature to match what each individual woman responds to best. This isn't manipulation, it's social intelligence developed through extensive field experience. The pattern recognition matrix also includes understanding of relationship cycles, seasonal patterns in female psychology, and the impact of external stressors on romantic availability. This knowledge allows him to time his approaches, avoid common pitfalls, and navigate relationship phases with expertise that appears almost supernatural to outside observers. One of the most significant competitive advantages that wounded men develop is superior emotional intelligence, the ability to read, understand, and respond appropriately to emotional information. This advantage develops because emotional survival required them to become experts at decoding psychological signals that less experienced men completely miss. The romantic refugee has learned to read micro-expressions, decode voice tone variations, and interpret body language with the accuracy of a trained psychologist. He can sense when a woman is uncomfortable, recognize when she's testing him, and identify when her words don't match her actual emotional state. This emotional literacy developed through necessity. Men who can't read women accurately keep getting surprised by betrayals, rejections, and relationship failures. This emotional intelligence manifests in conversation as an almost telepathic ability to say exactly what a woman needs to hear at exactly the right moment. The romantic refugee can sense when someone needs encouragement versus when they need challenge, when they want to be listened to versus when they want advice, and when they're seeking connection versus when they need space. The advantage extends beyond just reading women to understanding the emotional dynamics that drive attraction, relationship development, and romantic satisfaction. The romantic refugee understands that women's stated preferences often conflict with their actual behavioral patterns, that logical arguments rarely change emotional positions, and that timing matters more than content in romantic communications. This emotional intelligence also includes understanding his own psychological patterns, emotional triggers, and behavioral tendencies. The romantic refugee has been forced to examine his own psychology to understand why his previous approaches failed, which gives him self-awareness that men who've never been seriously hurt rarely develop. The combination of understanding female psychology and understanding his own psychology allows him to navigate romantic interactions with a level of sophistication that appears effortless, but actually represents years of painful education in the reality of human attraction and relationship dynamics. The most crucial element in the romantic refugee's transformation is the development of what I call the defensive mastery system, a comprehensive approach to romantic interactions that prevents emotional vulnerability while maintaining attractiveness. This system operates automatically once it's fully developed, creating the appearance of natural confidence while actually representing sophisticated psychological protection. The system includes emotional firewalls that prevent overinvestment in any particular romantic outcome. The romantic refugee has learned to maintain multiple options, avoid putting women on pedestals, and keep his self-worth independent of external validation. These protections aren't cynical. They're practical responses to discovering that emotional neediness destroys attraction, regardless of how justified that neediness might seem. Defensive mastery also includes communication strategies that maintain interest while avoiding vulnerability. The romantic refugee has learned to be engaging without being revealing, charming without being desperate, and interested without being needy. He can flirt effectively because he's not emotionally dependent on positive responses, joke comfortably because he's not afraid of negative reactions, and escalate confidently because rejection no longer threatens his self-concept. The system includes what I call outcome independence, the ability to pursue romantic goals without being attached to specific results. This independence paradoxically makes him more attractive because desperation and neediness are immediate attraction killers, while confidence and self-sufficiency are powerful aphrodisiacs. Defensive mastery also encompasses understanding of when to invest emotion and when to maintain distance. The romantic refugee has learned to recognize women who are worth emotional investment versus those who are simply entertaining options. He can distinguish between situations that have genuine potential and interactions that are just social entertainment. The most sophisticated aspect of the system is its ability to create genuine connections while maintaining protective boundaries. The romantic refugee can be emotionally present without being emotionally dependent, vulnerable without being needy, and caring without being desperate. This calibration is nearly impossible to achieve without having experienced the pain of emotional overinvestment. The ultimate irony in the transformation of wounded men is that the process designed to protect them from emotional pain often prevents them from experiencing the very love they originally sought. The defensive mastery system that makes them attractive to women also makes it difficult for them to form the deep, trusting relationships that could provide genuine satisfaction and healing. This creates what I call the success trap. The romantic refugee becomes so skilled at attracting women and avoiding emotional vulnerability that he finds himself perpetually in relationships that feel hollow despite being technically successful. He can generate attraction, maintain multiple options, and avoid being hurt, but he struggles to access the emotional intimacy that made relationships meaningful before his transformation. The irony deepens when the romantic refugee encounters women who could actually love him in the way he originally hoped to be loved, but his defensive systems prevent him from recognizing or responding to genuine affection. He's become so expert at detecting manipulation and hidden agendas that he sometimes misinterprets authentic interest as sophisticated game playing. Some romantic refugees get trapped in this defensive stance permanently, becoming the emotionally unavailable men that future romantics will get hurt by, perpetuating the cycle that created them. Others eventually learn to selectively lower their defenses for women who demonstrate the loyalty and authenticity that their original belief system promised, but their experience suggested didn't exist. The most successful romantic refugees eventually develop what I call selective vulnerability, the ability to maintain their defensive mastery system while creating space for genuine connection with women who prove themselves worthy of emotional investment. This requires sophisticated discernment between women who deserve protection and women who deserve trust. The tragic beauty of this evolution is that men who've been hurt the most often become the most capable of creating the relationships that could heal their wounds, but only if they can learn to risk vulnerability again with women who've earned it through consistent demonstration of loyalty, authenticity, and emotional maturity. If this exploration of how romantic trauma creates dating expertise has revealed patterns you recognize in your own life or the men around you, subscribe to this channel for more insights into the hidden psychology of attraction and relationships. Hit that notification bell because understanding these transformation patterns could completely change how you interpret male behavior in romantic contexts. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand that the men who seem most confident with women often carry the deepest romantic scars, and that emotional mastery frequently emerges from emotional devastation. The goal isn't to glorify pain or justify emotional unavailability, it's to understand the complex psychology behind why some of the most skilled lovers are also some of the most wounded souls. Remember, every master was once a disaster, every expert was once a beginner, and every confident man was once a broken boy who decided that pain was a better teacher than hope. The question isn't whether you'll get hurt in love, it's whether you'll let that hurt destroy you or educate you. Understanding this pattern doesn't excuse emotional unavailability or justify playing games with people's hearts, but it does explain why the men who seem to understand women best are often the ones who've been hurt by women most. Scar tissue might be stronger than skin, but it's also less sensitive to touch, and sometimes that's exactly what makes it so attractive to people who are tired of being hurt themselves.